Hey there, happy friends, Even Star here, and as you can see, I'm not in the shed, but I still kind of am at Hancock's House of Happy. I'm visiting my mom and dad's at their beautiful home in Portugal. Hooray! Yes. And I'm here to talk to you today about all the wonderful free cross-stitch designs that are going to be up on the website next week. The theme is Halloween because October starts next week, so we've got a whole week of Halloween themed cross-stitch designs for you to download, as well as a really cool Patreon design. Now, I'm going to cut the video here and go inside because I just realized it's like really noisy here. There's like dogs and chickens and birds and things here, so I'm actually going to go inside now. Which the view will not be as interesting or beautiful as it is right now, but I'll be back in a second. There, that's a little bit better. I'm gonna take my sunglasses off so you can actually see my face. I'm gonna take my hair down as well. So yes, there we go. You can see some of my mom's fabulous art on the wall. My mom's a painter. And yes, so let's launch into all the great free designs next week. So like I said, next week is all about, actually I'm gonna put this back up again. It's bothering me. I need a haircut. Next week is all sort of Halloween themed cross-stitch designs. Now, I've only done like a week of Halloween, and I know like some people like love Halloween. It's like the entire month of October is taken up with like you know, constructing costumes and decorating the house, and you know, that's really awesome. I admire your dedication. However, Halloween never really figured that largely in my life. So, you know, we did it when we were kids, right? You know, my brother and I would do Halloween when we were kids. And so I was probably like 10 or 11, I think was my last time we went out trick-or-treating. But the issue, you know, with Halloween, which is why I've never really had a terrible amount of enthusiasm for Halloween, is that growing up in the west coast of Canada, Halloween was usually raining. It usually poured rain Halloween night because that's what it does in British Columbia on the west coast for like 350 nights of the year. So, you know, even though my mom would make us like really great costumes, we'd go out trick-or-treating and no one would actually see the costumes because we'd be covered up in all like rain gear and rubber boots and everything. So very rarely did we actually get to show anybody our costumes when we went out trick-or-treating. And the other thing is that it was always a bit of a chore for mom and dad. At least I always imagined it was a little bit of a chore because they actually had to, you know, you say it's like, well, we'll take the kids trick-or-treating. And it's like they actually had to take us because where I lived was a little bit remote. So the street where I lived, there was like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 houses on it. You know, you might get 5 people at home for Halloween. And that was it. So they actually had to drive us, probably must have been like a mile up the road, to where there was like another neighborhood with more houses. So it always seemed like a little bit of a chore for mom and dad because they had to actually like take us for the sake of just like free candy. And then I think, you know, once I got to the age of, you know, 10 or 11, I simply grew out of it. And I really just didn't, you know, I still loved candy, and I still love candy. But it was just something I never really... That whole thing just was something I've never really got on board with. I always like, you know, I always remember like coming home after trick-or-treating and going through all the candy and checking for razor blades and things like that. And then watching like really sort of dumb monster movies on TV, like black and white, you know, Bela Lugosi, Hammer horror type. And for some one that like sticks in my mind is like this really bad Harmony Gold's anime Dracula for some reason. I think we might have like taped it off the TV and watched every year. So Halloween never really figured large in my life. I'd be interested to know like what is Halloween like for you. And I tried to make the designs not hugely sort of Halloweeny. I've tried to have the theme like sort of a little bit of Halloween, but also kind of spooky, you know, spooky October, you know, days are getting shorter, nights are getting longer. Where I live in the UK, the light this time of year at dusk is really beautiful, but also spooky because you get like lots of fog where I live. So, you know, that's kind of it's like kind of a fun time of year. And I like fall as well. I think that fall might be one of my favorite. I think it might be my favorite season because it's not quite summer. It's not quite baking hot summer. The weather is more reliable than springtime. And plus you have all this wonderful sort of like, it's, you know, it's harvest time and I get to make jelly and jam and wine and things like that. So that's my experience of Halloween, and that's where, you know, I kind of tell you this stuff so it gives you an idea of where my ideas come from and what inspires me and kind of, you know, what's the background of some of the designs. So I think the first design I have up is this like spooky, it's sort of a witch's cauldron, so you've got a little bit of Halloween in there, but you've also got sort of a really crisp full moon lit night, which I associate with that time of year where I am now. You know, by the end of October we get really crisp, chilly nights. Don't get so much rain as we do in you know, out on the west coast of Canada. And I wanted to do you know, try a little bit more of a designy type element there, where you've got a shape, so the shape of the vapor coming off the cauldron and trying to fit in, you know, sort of an interesting landscape in there. It's like the witches are brewing up some kind of story or landscape there. So yeah, I had fun doing this one. I kind of like the tall format as well. I like to do like sort of different formats for my design, so having that tall format was kind of interesting. So the next one is a more fun one. You might recognize the style from last week's bee and beehive. The sort of branch there is sort of taken from that design. And it's two kind of really like snarky vampire bats. And the inspiration came to me with the words, and I was rolling these words around and around in my head. It's like, you know, bite me, suck it, right? I wanted to have two different monsters there, but I really couldn't think of anything like, you know, bite me is a vampire, suck it is a vampire. I couldn't think of any sort of other sort of monster to put in there where they'd be kind of like sniping back at each other. You know, this is sort of like when I was in university, Interview with the Vampire. That film came out, which I still love. I think it's a really culty, campy, classic, wonderful film. It's just so over the top, and that story is so over the top. So this is kind of like my version of like Lestat and Louis, like snarking at each other, because, you know, they're kind of stuck with each other, but they hate each other, right? And they can't share the branch. They can't share the branch there. And, you know, one of them's trying to sleep, and the other one's probably like jumping up and down on that branch. So I just thought the words and the design actually came together better than I thought it would. I think the bats are really cute. This is a really good design for a beginner because, like the beehive design from last week, it's just big blocks of color. You can kind of just tune out and just count your stitches in one color. You don't have to worry about fitting in little tiny bits of different colors everywhere. And I just think that those two guys they're quite funny. Next up, we have not quite so Halloween, but at that time of year, it's Dia de Muerte, so Day of the Dead, which is that celebration in Central America, Mexico, and I kind of am a bit of an apologist here because using that design and not being of that ethnic background or culture, it is kind of cultural appropriation, and you may think that I'm getting a little bit uptight about it. You may be like pointing at me right now and going like, even star cultural appropriation, like come on, right? Or you might be looking at me and just like shaking your head and going, it's like, what are you talking about, right? You know, that image of the sugar skull is like, I think so iconic. It's kind of migrated out of that particular culture and that particular celebration. I don't know if that's appropriate. So I come from a background of art history and especially studying women in art and the concept of like authenticity and depiction. Stuff like that does bother me, but I just love the colors and also the idea behind that celebration that, you know, once a year you go and visit your dead and see how they're doing and how are they doing on their spiritual journey. You know, they're always with you. And you know, when you visit and you talk to them and you make sure their house is clean and you bring them food, I think it's an amazing idea. It's a very sort of, it's like a death positive idea. I love the, you know, I love death positivity. You know, we're all going to die someday, right? And the idea that, you know, your relatives might, after, you know, every year, you know, they come and visit you and clean your grave and talk to you, I think is an extremely, not a morbid, but also an extremely comforting feeling, right? And it has nothing to do with gods or religion or the afterlife. You know, death is more to do with the living than the dead. And I think that this celebration of your ancestors and your loved ones is about, it's about life. You know, it is a celebration, and there's so many colors, and that's why I like this image of, you know, the sugar skull. And I enjoyed designing this. I looked at lots and lots of reference images. I wanted to get the, you know, the marigolds in there, you know, for the eyes. And also I was still practicing my backstitching technique in my designing tool. And I was really pleased with how the flowers on the forehead and the vines turned out there. So I hope that nobody takes offense at this and kind of takes it in the spirit of, you know, it's a celebration of life and also other cultures other than my own. The next design we have coming out on Thursday, kind of back to sort of a snarky Halloween theme, is this rather sassy witch on a broomstick. You know, like, witch, please, right? Witch, please. And I just realized when I was doing all the mock-ups and stuff for this that I made her shoes red, and that wasn't a particularly conscious decision. It was like I needed something to stand out against the black of her outfit, and to go with, you know, her sort of flaming hair as well. I don't know why I always kind of like picture witches with like flaming red hair. You know, that probably I always wished I had flaming curly red hair like that. But anyway, I realized that these were like the ruby slippers, and I started thinking about one of the films that we'd probably watch around Halloween time was The Wizard of Oz, and it's a film that I've always hated, you know, fight me, because I think it is a horrible, scary film for children. You know, I probably saw it when I was too young. It was awful. But I also really thought, you know, they were kind of mean to the witches, and maybe the witches were mean, but I also thought that they were there, you know, there's sort of an effort to bring order to this like really bizarre place. You know, those munchkins would never have had roads if it weren't for the witches. And at the very beginning of the film, this sort of really goody-goody, like non-entity, right, who had no personality, lands her house on this poor woman, right, and then steals her shoes, right? It's like, what do we teach? What does that teach children, right? That teaches children to judge people by their appearance, kill them, and steal their shoes. That's not right. So, you know, I'm standing up for the witches here. Witch, please, right? This last design, you'll have seen, I actually did a whole video on the designing of this and how I got to this finished product. And so on the website, I'll leave a link to that video. So there's not really much more to say about it. So there you've got Frankenstein's monster. I would actually call this probably like a steampunk design. So you've got sort of elements of electricity and copper tubes, and, you know, it's not quite science, but it's not quite not science. You know, it's sort of that in between, you know, Hollywood depiction of science. And you've got, you know, Frankenstein's monster. They're saying, it's like, I feel so alive. You know, he was dead a minute ago with all those bits sewn into him. It's like, you know, pump some electricity into me. Now I feel alive. Yeah, so I'll leave a link to that particular video. There's not much more to say about it. I mean, this did sort of come out of that, again, that sort of silly, you know, monster movie on Halloween night. That was, you know, it usually came on at 7 o'clock so kids could watch it, you know, that kind of thing. And it's on a black background, which, you know, I don't I don't usually do that, and that was very interesting designing for that color scheme. So exciting news is this week, so coming out on Tuesday, because it's October the 1st, on Tuesday, is your first Patreon exclusive for October, and I tried to keep with the sort of spooky theme, and it is this anatomical heart on a Ouija board planchette. So it's the thing that you use to, like, right, move around the Ouija board. And I just started off with this one with the anatomical heart, and I loved actually designing that because I had reference images and I had to draw it out on, because I make things hard for myself, right? I drew it out on a piece of paper, on a piece of graph paper, and did all the outlines, and then I put the outlines into my design tool, and then from there, with this just sort of black and white shell, I had to figure out all the shading and stuff. And I'm really pleased with how like three-dimensional and subtle some of that shading is on that heart. So I get that it's kind of weird, but I was kind of thinking about, it's like, what's sort of what's that spooky theme? You've got Frankenstein's monster, things like that. And then I had to put it on something because it was just sort of this sort of heart just floating in space. And I started looking at, sort of what could I kind of put around it to make it a little bit, less sort of lonely and more of a design. And I did look at things like, like a compass rose, flowers, but I kind of settled on the Ouija board planchette because it is sort of Halloween-y, and looking at reference images again, there's just so many interesting designs to put back there, and the sort of monochrome behind that heart just makes it just really, for me, it works really well, and that heart just kind of pops out. I wouldn't recommend this design for a beginner, but if you are a Patreon subscriber, so this is a Patreon exclusive, and it comes as, I think it's 9 pages. It's a 9-page design, so it's a really big design, 9-page PDF to download, so that'll be available on Tuesday, and the link will be up on the website, and I think Patreon sends you an email as well to let you know. But if you'd like this design, it's only $2 a month to be a Patreon subscriber, and you get 3 free cross-stitch designs exclusive to you per month. So we're going into October, so we've already had 6 designs up there. So if you join now, those 6 designs that have already happened are still available to you. And if you look at the website again, you'll see what those are, because some of those are really cool. And I'll leave a link for if you want to subscribe to Patreon. In other news, I've actually figured out, and I'm going to be trying out in the next couple of months, ways to sell product not on Etsy. So if you like one of these Patreon designs, I will be trying them out at for retail download. There's a couple of platforms I'm going to experiment with. Retail value will vary, so this heart one, I'm thinking that's probably going to be between $5 to $10 depending on the size. Probably more like $5 or $6. Some of my other ones maybe a bit less. There's a couple that will be a lot more, so maybe around $10. So you can see that, subscribing to Patreon, actually you get a pretty big discount from the retail value. So anyway, I've been talking for like 20 minutes, and I've been thinking of ways to like make these videos shorter. I don't know, do you like them like this? Or the reason I do videos is because to write all of that stuff about the designs, to introduce them and get people interested in them, it would just take me a lot longer than sitting in front of a camera for 20 minutes just blathering away. So anyway, I'd be interested in what you think, and if there's just a way of making them shorter, if you'd like me to talk less about the design process or the inspiration, I'm happy to do that. So yeah, leave me a comment below, and whatever you're doing, this week. I know you're going to do great at it. And I'll see you all next time. Okay? Bye.